Make up mind. Fight.
I'm sure that every TF2 player has a weapon or two that they really hate. For reasons as broad as it's just not fun to fight against, to reasons as specific and bloated as its design compromises the gameplay integrity of this video game. Regardless of your reason though, I think all of us can agree that some weapons in TF2 are just really annoying. In a game as old as Team Fortress 2 with over 130 unlockable weapons, it kinda comes with the territory that there would be some that aren't quite up to snuff with others in terms of fun factor to play against. Everyone has their own personal boogeyman weapons, but recently, I wanted to try and figure out what my personal least favorite to fight against was. Which TF2 weapon elicits the most viscerally negative reaction from me when I see an enemy using it? That's what I wanted to figure out. So here's what I did. I looked at a list of every weapon in the game, carefully curated a smaller list of one for each class that specifically annoyed me, and then matched them up against each other in a sort of coliseum of hatred. In this video, I want to discuss my findings. We're going to be briefly discussing what I believe to be each class's most annoying weapon to fight against, and try to figure out which is the true king of TF2 horse hockey, from my perspective anyways. We'll place each weapon on a tier list, and whoever ranks the highest will be my pick for TF2's most annoying weapons. The tiers will be the lowest tier, being that'll be just fine, followed by salvageable if reworked, followed by best left removed, and finally the king of slop on top. If you disagree with any of my findings, sound off in the comments. Otherwise, let's point and laugh at some of this game we love's biggest design failings. I want to stress that this video is in no way intended to be an indictment on you if you enjoy using any of these weapons. Contrary to the opinions of some TF2 players, what weapons you use in a 17-year-old video game is not at all reflective of your real-life character, and it'll do us all well to remember that sometime. All that said, let's dive in.
What's the matter? You freaking stupid?
Starting us off is Scout, and he's in an interesting position to start off with because I struggle to think of any one item on him that makes him exceptionally annoying to fight. It's kind of just baked into his design. Like, when I think about getting annoyed fighting Scout, it's because he's flying around me like a twitchy mosquito and hammering me with 100+ damage meat shots, and not anything to do with his unlocks. I almost settled on things like the Soda Popper and Rap Assassin until I realized that the answer was in the jar the whole time. The Mad Milk is a controversial TF2 weapon for a reason. While it is very committal to use due to its lengthy cooldown, a well-aimed Mad Milk toss can absolutely be a match decider under the right circumstances. Splashing this item on enemies causes 60% of all damage they take to be returned to the attacker as healing, meaning that all a Scout needs to do to grant him and his entire team game-winning self-sustain is blind toss a jar of suspicious white liquid at the enemy and hope for the best. In a 1v1 specifically, a Scout who can land his shots is pretty much impossible to outdamage when he's hit you with this, as he'll be healing in excess of 60 health with every successfully landed meat shot. If you're someone who really cares about tracking damage numbers and paying attention to damage thresholds in this game, getting splash of this item will certainly drive you up the wall. In a teamfight environment, this weapon can single-handedly push the Scouts using its side to victory, providing unparalleled self-sustain to everyone who gets a chance to land an attack on the coded enemies. It's a very rewarding weapon to take full advantage of, in addition to being very splashable into a wide variety of loadouts. That said, the Mad Milk is also exceptionally committal to use, as its tremendous cooldown make it so that game-winning pushes caused by it are very few and far between, and makes it so that the Scout has to be very picky-choosy in how he uses it. If he uses it to douse a fire, he'll be out of it for his next team fight, and if he uses it in his next team fight, he won't have it next time he's up in smoke. So while the Mad Milk is very annoying to be on the receiving end of, I struggle to call it one of the game's top most annoying weapons due to the fact that it isn't entirely free to make use of. With a smaller percentage of health returned on hit, I think it could be totally fine. I'll place it in the salvageable if reworked tier as a result.
Time to inform your next of kin!
For Soldier, we have a weapon that I've actually gone to bat for in the past and have never felt as negatively about as others. I actually hate rocket jumping soldiers way more than users of this weapon, but in my heart of hearts, I know that that's just me, and that Soldier's true most annoying weapon for most people is the black box. Now, this is a special case, as this is a weapon that I personally find to be extremely well balanced. It heals up to 20 health per rocket, but only loads 3 rockets per clip, giving it an all-around lower attack uptime and DPS than any other rocket launcher in exchange for some handy self-sustain. The reason people hate this thing is that it can really mess up in the moment damage calculations and thresholds. It admittedly feels like utter dog shit to land what should be a guaranteed amount of shots to kill a soldier on him, and have him narrowly survive for the kill because his rockets are leeching your health with every bit of splash damage. Not unlike the Mad Milk, if you're the kind of person who lives and dies by the purity of this game's damage thresholds, you'll likely hate the black box. It's also worth noting that this item is a key component to one of TF2's most reviled weapon synergies, but let's save talking about that for a later date. I don't think it's fair to hold a consequential item combo against a single weapon for the purposes of the discussions in this video. On its own though, the black box is certainly annoying in the fringe situation where the up to 20 health difference will definitively lose you a fight, but I personally find these situations to not be super common outside of 1v1s between soldiers and other power classes, and honestly find the black box's lack of a fourth rocket to be a much more weapon-defining stat than its self-healing. It really can't go overstated just how much soldier lives and dies by his clip, and any weapon that shrinks it will likely have an uphill battle for relevancy. So while I do understand the vitriol for the black box by some players, I also ultimately find it to genuinely be one of TF2's more thoughtfully designed and balanced weapons, and for that reason, I'll charitably place it in the that'll be just fine tier. This one was really close to teetering into the tier above it though, trust me, and if we were considering the conch combo with it, it would definitely be up there. Pyro is in absolutely no shortage of annoying weapons. This class as a whole is basically a living example of everything not to do when designing content for a competitive multiplayer game. They have annoyingness baked into their core design, with hefty damage over time and non-committal CC and displacement being among their core abilities. And while common picks for their most annoying weapon like the Phlogistonator or Thermal Thruster are definitely tempting, you just can't beat classics like the Scorch Shot. The Scorch Shot is one of TF2's big boogeymen, a weapon that everyone except the Pyro using it absolutely hates. When you equip this weapon, you're basically signing your soul away at the same time, offering insanely non-committal long-range damage in CC, ridiculously generous afterburn that can guarantee kills from across the map, a generous splash zone for damage, guaranteed mini-crits that can combo off of themselves, and even added mobility as a perk. This weapon really does it all. The amount of brain cells you need to successfully use this weapon could give the average Twitter apologist a run for their money, and it's all wrapped up in a package that's just as easy to use as it is startlingly effective for that ease of use. What's crazy too is that this is all stuff that the Detonator does as well, but arguably better, with a harsher learning curve and more effective damage over time and mobility to boot. So you could get good at the game and learn a weapon that rewards timing, accuracy, and positioning, or you could just press mouse 1 from across the map and deal over 100 damage. The Scorch Shot is easily one of my personal least favorite TF2 weapons to be on the receiving end of, and for that, I'll place it in the best left removed tier.
Time to get blooded!
Moving on to Demoman, he's another class that I feel doesn't have an immediately obvious pick for his most annoying weapon. The Sticky Bomb Launcher can be busted as hell when used for spam, but it's also a stock weapon, and I really don't want to include those in this video. The whole Demo Knight set can become insurmountable with a good game state and some luck, but also requires being allowed to reach that point to flourish. After some careful consideration, I kinda realized that Demoman's only true annoying unlockable, in my opinion, on its own merits, is the Loose Cannon. So full transparency, this is the least annoying weapon in the video, and it's only here because we need a Demoman pick. Yes, it is quite frustrating to be bounced around by a beach ball by this weapon's 50 damage shots, and yes, it is annoying when you get one shot as a light class by a well-aimed and placed double dong, but that's the thing. While these traits are annoying to be on the receiving end of, they are in no way free or even easy for the Demoman compared to other stuff we'll discuss in this video. The Loose Cannon has one of the most obtuse designs in the game, coming with a ton of baked-in knowledge and skill checks that are entirely unique to it. Between its slow and tumbling projectile, its multi-hitting attacks, its fuse charging mechanic, and its all-around janky nature, the Loose Cannon genuinely is a weapon that requires getting good with to get the most out of it. Compared to pretty much every other weapon in this video, there is a clear and pronounced difference between a skilled and unskilled Loose Cannon Demoman. It's also fun as hell and one of the funniest weapons in the game, so I struggle to reconcile with putting this weapon alongside other annoying heavy hitters in the game for this video. This will easily be our lowest ranked weapon for the entire video, resting very snugly in the that'll be just fine tier.
Fight like Big Mac!
Next up is Heavy, my personal favorite class, and one who I feel has a single very obvious choice for this video. We can joke all we want about how heavy mains don't exist and how the ones who do always stick to the same bread and butter weapon sets, but you'd better count yourself lucky that it is that way, because we would not want to contend with a higher ratio of Natasha users. The Natasha is genuinely a poorly conceived TF2 weapon. Why does the fastest firing, highest sustained damage dealing weapon category in the game need a side grade that also slows enemies on top of its tremendous tremendous damage output. Does heavy really need that? Are enemies who are close enough to be slowed not also up shit creek without a paddle already? This is a prime example of one mechanic and one stat completely compromising a weapon conceptually, and it's fucked up because it's the weapon's main mechanic. Slowdown effects are incredibly rare in TF2, and they're only split between this thing and the Sandman. Your options for slowdown on a weapon are a once every few seconds single-use projectile that does 15 damage, or a fucking minigun. And yeah, while it does deal less damage than its alternatives, it's still a minigun, and its output combined with its slowing effect granting you more time to shoot enemies means that its damage penalty is pretty negligible. Even in situations where it isn't, it also comes with a baked-in damage resistance below half health, meaning that heavy can stay in the fight longer to make up for its compromised damage output. I'm kind of a Natasha apologist, as I like using heavy's more atypical options more than the average bear, but I also kind of end up feeling a bit dirty after using it each time, like I'm breaking some kind of unspoken rule. For that reason, I'll be placing the Natasha alongside the Scorch Shot in the best left removed tier.
Come here, sissy.
On to Engineer, and I don't even gotta hide his choice. You know it, and I know it. It's the Wrangler. This is a weapon that's been well documented in the community's derision of it. It's seen as a brain-dead, non-committal tanking option for Engineer sentries that turns one of the best area denial tools in the game into also one of the tankiest ones, granting sentries an effective health value that exists in excess of 600 in exchange for the crippling downside of... This weapon grants Engineer some of the most reliable area holding capabilities in the game for very little input on his part. The sheer amount of insane damage soaking potential you gain by pulling out the Wrangler is almost silly, and when you combine that with the Engineer also taking manual control of his sentry gun, being able to fire outside of its effective range, and doubling the sentry's firing rate, and you've got a weapon that goes from a handy utility to a damn near essential tool for defensive play. That said, I don't think the Wrangler belongs in the best left removed tier, at least not all of it. Taking manual control of your sentry gun is fun, and does grant you access to some neat tech and unique sentry spots. I think that if this weapon were just that, the manually controlling your sentry, we'd have a real winner on our hands. However, the addition of a 66% damage shield on top of that is what really pushes this weapon over the edge, and turns what would be a fun and intuitive shakeup tool into what it is now. Because of this, I'm gonna tentatively place the Wrangler in the salvageable if reworked tier. If we did away with, or even just toned down the shield, we'd be looking at an entirely different weapon. The tiers above this are for items that are screwed conceptually. They're bad at their cores. This weapon is savable. It just has to come out of its shell and stop hiding behind its shield.
You are trying my patience.
Next up is Medic, and he's our third class in a row with an obvious, easy-bake choice. You want to know how you turn the game's respected, dedicated soul healer into the most hated thing on the battlefield? Fuck. Yeah, everyone hates the Vaccinator, and it's not even any argument. This is another weapon that I feel is just bad on the inside, like it has an ugly soul. Granting a constant 10% resistance to a chosen damage type, buffing that to 75% plus full crit resistance on top of that with an Uber, and uncompromised healing compared to stock is absolutely deplorable, and the fact that the Uber charge is both the only one in the game that's granted in incredibly disposable chunks of 25, and allows the medic and his heal target to continue capturing objectives under its effects, really cements this thing's place as one of the game's most hated weapons. It really is the fuck you in particular medigun, doing nothing for the medic and his heal target but pissing off at least one member of the enemy team at a time. And when you consider that cycling between resistances comes at no cost and that it can in fact be done fast enough to stack multiple resistances on one target, and you might be starting to understand the Vaccinator's reputation. It's not even like especially good. A single Uber with this thing is nowhere near as impactful or game-changing as an Uber with any other medigun. It just makes the Vac medic and his heal target a constant annoying blemish on the map they're on, like a pimple that won't go away. Removing the agency of enemy players to fight back against you is already bound to earn you some enemies, but when you combine this with the weapon's other bells and whistles, its incredibly generous Uber rate, and you've got a vile little thing on your hands that really has no place in the game. This is a medigun that you need to be fully committed to using when you equip it. You don't bring it to break a specific hold or clear a specific group of enemies. You equip the Vaccinator knowing that you're going to piss people off with it. And for all of these reasons, I'm currently placing the Vaccinator in the best left removed tier.
Let's see how much blood's in you.
Sniper is funny for this video because he is, by all accounts, the most hated class in the game in general. It's hard to pick a definitive most annoying weapon when pretty much everything this class is capable of has already been harshly scrutinized by the community at large for years. Yes, Sniper is indeed TF2's #1 punching bag. Okay, yeah, Jarate is Sniper's most annoying weapon, and it's not even close. While things like the Bizarre Bargain and Sydney Sleeper certainly do exist in the game, they are at the very least weapons that require some degree of mechanical aiming skill to make the most out of. The Jarate, while very iconic and funny, is another very easy to use, very impactful, and very splashable weapon that improves virtually every loadout it's equipped on. Conventional game design logic would lead you to believe that the game's dedicated long-range instant kill class shouldn't be able to instant kill people at close range as well, but since when was TF2 ever conventional? By splashing Jarate on an enemy or group of enemies, you've added a crippling condition to the fight for them, making every bit of damage they take hurt substantially more, and making their time to act and fight back much stricter. You're effectively tossing a 33% extra damage AoE debuff at enemies every time you throw this thing, and that debuff is splashable on multiple enemies at the same time. The amount of impact a well-timed Jarate toss can have on the outcome of a match is staggering, and unlike the Mad Milk, which functions similarly but is on a class who's much more likely to be active on the front lines, Sniper can afford to be liberal with his Jarate usage because he's less likely to absolutely need it at any given moment. It's very funny to me that one of TF2's most impactful weapons is a literal jar of human piss, and whichever way you may slice it, this is an annoying weapon. Regardless, I'll be placing it in the salvageable if reworked tier, if only because it shares a lot of mechanics with other salvageable tier weapon, the Mad Milk. Lengthen its cooldown or shrink its area of effect, and I think it would be a lot less severe.
You disgust me.
And for our last weapon in the video, our spy pick, we've got the lamest fucking weapon in the game, the Dead Ringer. I feel like this might be a controversial choice, as I'm sure some people would stand by the Diamondback or Conniver's Kunai as Spy's most annoying weapon, but please bear with me. The problem with the Dead Ringer isn't just that it enables Spy to play in a hyper-aggressive manner that the game was never designed to accommodate. It isn't just that it allows him to throw himself into enemies knowing he has a free get-out-of-jail-free card. It isn't just that it shuns its own admittedly cool death feigning mechanic in favor of a mindless face tanking strategy, but it's also because it single-handedly enables pretty much every other widely hated Spy strategy to flourish. The Conniver's Kunai is very impactful if Spy manages to land a backstab with it, but it becomes even more so when he's got a free get-out-of-jail-free card for making a mistake. The Diamondback has insane snowball potential and grants Spy ridiculous damage potential, but becomes even more ridiculous when Spy is never truly at risk of losing his allocated crits. If there's a controversial Spy strategy you can think of, then I promise you that it's at the very least bolstered in some way by the presence of the Dead Ringer. I don't like throwing around claims like this, as I am not a professional game designer by any stretch, but the Dead Ringer seems genuinely poorly designed for me. And if the fact that Valve has tried and failed at numerous points to rework this weapon doesn't cue you into that fact, then surely its reputation will. This is another surefire choice for the best left removed tier. So, where are we at? Well, we have 4 weapons in our top tier, and they're all diligently fighting for our prestigious Lord of Slop title. We've got the Scorch Shot, a brain-dead easy weapon that does just a bit too much for just a bit too little. The Natasha, a poorly conceived weapon that gives Heavy an ability he should never have. The Vaccinator, a downright despicable weapon that laughs in the face of most of the game's 9 classes. And the Dead Ringer, a true bastion of poor design in TF2 that enables some of the most disgusting playstyles for the class it's featured on. I deliberated a lot over which weapon to give our prestigious title, and after a bit of consideration, I landed on the Vaccinator. It's the Vaccinator. I think the Vaccinator is TF2's most annoying weapon. While the others I've talked about here do feel poorly designed and conceived, they do at the very least fill niches in their class's lineups, and don't feel nearly as personal to fight against as the Vac. The Vaccinator is a weapon that doesn't do much in the broad strokes of the average TF2 match, aside from making the medic and his heal target incredibly difficult to kill in the most annoying, ever-present manner possible. It requires very little thought, commitment, or game state savvy to use well, and despite posturing itself as a thinking man's medigun, all that the thought required really boils down to is remembering where your reload button is on your keyboard and rapidly cycling between resistances. For giving a proud, defiant middle finger to at least one person on the enemy team at all times, and for doing so without an ounce of humor or conceptual uniqueness, the Vaccinator is our winner for today. Or loser, depending on how you look at it. Here's our finalized tier list for reference. But what do you think? Did I overrate certain weapons or underrate others? Do you really like the Scorch Shot or really hate some innocuous random weapon like the Pain Train? Sound off in the comments. This is just my perspective and I'm excited to hear yours. Just to be civil. Thanks, hope y'all had a fantastic day before, during, and after watching, and I'll catch y'all later. Cheers.